it's hard enough to look at social media and see everyone's vacation pictures. I mean, there's no vacation pictures right now. Like, I feel like this has been one of the benefits of the pandemic. It's this equalizing, no one's doing anything fun, um, but it's easy to look at someone's picture and say, oh gosh, she looks so good in that dress. Oh, maybe if I lost 5 pounds, or you automatically see the comparisons. But again, you're not seeing what's going on behind it. And the really damaging piece is when you are comparing yourself to yourself. So here I was, again, I was sharing all the positive things, pictures of the beautiful family, the successful, work trip, or whatever it was, my happy smiling picture with my husband when we were like going through hell, and wasn't showing what was behind it. And so I wasn't even meeting my own expectations of myself. When you get in this comparison trap of yourself, it's really damaging mentally to yourself.
Absolutely. Well, and you write, one of my favorite, I loved the whole book, but in chapter 15, you talk about projection game. And you write about that. You say how your husband, Kale, looked over your shoulder as you posted a picture on Instagram and said, those little squares aren't real. But then you wrote that you found comfort in those beautifully filtered pictures, knowing they showed you at your best. And that's what you wanted, a family that functioned at its best. You wanted the life you wish you were living, which you were putting out there: a happy marriage, a healthy wife, happy motherhood, and then say, yes, behind the scenes, you were barely surviving.
Hmm. Yes, and I think that was the hardest part to reconcile. And I think too, it really shows you can be going through personal turmoil, you can have trauma, you can have pain, and you still can have joy in there too. And I think a lot of people dismiss their difficulties, they dismiss their trauma because things aren't so bad. And, our marriage was like on the brink, but there's always that but we're still getting by, but we're still doing this. And I think so much of it is demanding more for yourself, and not demanding more of what you think other people want or what you think you should look like, but just of how you feel. And so social media is a tough one for me because I have found so much connection and camaraderie, but it's required me to become more vulnerable. And that's how I found that. When I was just posting all the pretty filtered stuff, I was projecting a version of myself that did not even exist.
Yeah. And one of the things I love, and I've talked about this before, about I'm a member of a couple secret Facebook groups for people who are struggling with drinking, trying to quit drinking, or have quit drinking. And two of my favorites are the Booze Free Brigade and She Recovers Together. Those are the ones who are sort of my home group, if you will. And
Mhm.
I do have a guide on how to find them and how to join, because they're so helpful to me, as even now, but especially when I was trying to quit drinking. But in a weird way, those women and a few very good men helped me. And I shared with them, honestly, things that I never shared with other friends, even friends from high school who I'm still very close to, because they understood. And there actually was some comfort in sharing with people who weren't in my everyday life, and to have them say, me too, and you're a badass for getting a week, and it's all going to be okay, and kind of hang on, it gets better.
Yeah, and finding your people is so key. And when I started in AA, and walking into those rooms, I mean, that's the heaviest door you can ever open is the door to that church basement. I expected to see people who looked nothing like me, acted nothing like me, felt nothing like me. I went into a women's meeting. They were all women, and I figured that'd be the only connection. And no, everyone didn't look the same. No, everyone didn't look like me. But the stories I heard, as soon as someone opened their mouth, I was like, oh my gosh. Another person opened their mouth. I'm like, oh my gosh. There were so many more similarities. And it really just sat, and that's the first time I opened my mouth, and it was like the floodgates. I am, and I was sitting there crying just because I was so overwhelmed by the fact that I could say these things that were so locked away, that I was so ashamed of. And I'm like, this is all of a sudden, these are my people, these total strangers, things I had never said to anyone. And it's so powerful when you find those people. And now I I find those people everywhere now, which is so funny because one thing which I talk about in my book is I had the one sober friend. Well, of course, I wasn't looking for sober friends before. And now they're all around me. So it's like what you kind of put out there is what you attract. And if you're not being vulnerable with people, you're not going to find the people you can be vulnerable with. And
Yeah.
that's what I have found through this recovery process for sure.
And when you're more honest, you get so much more support, and it's incredible. And even when you're honest in a very, I do it in a very, well, forget it. I'm out, right? I'm a sober coach. I host a podcast, but in the beginning, maybe my first 2, 3 years, once I was comfortable, once I didn't feel like I was going to be sort of blown over by a feather, I would say, oh, I used to drink a lot, but I quit a year ago.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was just people would be like, "Oh, why'd you quit?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I found that it was making me sleep terribly, and it was pushing my anxiety over the edge, and also it was a lot harder to achieve my goals in life, like fitness and health and all the things."